Hello and welcome back to this SlimDevOps. Oh, what number is it? Is it 29?
I think it's 29.
29. Go us.
I only know
Right,
that
we're
from
nearly
writing for
we're
28.
nearly into middle age. Right, welcome back to this SlimDevOps 29. This was originally recorded live on twitch.tv/SlimDevOps on January the 13th. If you would like to join in these sessions interactively and you're watching this on YouTube, then do head over to our Twitch channel and give us a follow. So, hello Peter, good to see you again.
Hi Martin. Yeah, you too. Good to be back. Number 2 for the year, 2022. So.
Yeah, so this is an interesting one this evening. I'm looking forward to getting into this. I say I'm looking forward to getting into it, but it's really down to you. You're putting yourself out there today, aren't you?
I am hands to the keyboard, but I'm bringing some help. So Evan's here with us. Evan, say hello to everybody.
Hi, I'm Evan. I'm one of the engineers on the Slim.AI engineering team, and yeah, happy to join Peter with a little co-pilot session, standing up a Vue application. That's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, we called in the big guns because Martin and I have been doing a lot of Linux terminal command line. We've been doing a lot of Dockerfile. We've gotten comfortable in that space. We've even been doing Docker Compose. I, of course, have some Python chops, but not much on the front end side. And if people remember from last time, what we wanted to do was create a much prettier, much more functional, much more modern front end for this photo app that we've been building. And so we asked Evan to come and help us because we're going to be going into Vue.js and Nuxt and Vuetify and some of these more node-based JavaScript frameworks. And we thought we could use the assist. So adventure into front-end land. Hope everybody is along for the ride. But Evan, just tell us a little bit about your background, just so people can get to know you. Like, when did you join Slim.AI? What were you doing before? What kind of stuff do you like coding and developing? Give us all that out.
Sure. So I've been on the team, I think I'm going into my 8th month now. Been a lot of fun so far. Been learning a lot. Previously, I guess my first experience with containers, right? That's kind of why we're all here, was pretty much at my very first software job, I don't know, 4-ish years ago at this point about, and super interesting technology. And this is my first time joining a company really focusing on containers. I've been generally working in the web application development space across a variety of industries, some more security experience, some more blockchain experience. But I've always really had a passion for really improving developer experience. It's challenging to do development work day in and day out. And really the more hours everybody can put in to make developers' lives easier, it's just better. So this opportunity today to join Pieter and Martin is just, my first time on a stage to try to talk in public about, hey, how do we do this thing, right? How do we build web applications and how do we containerize it? So super excited to be here, and yeah, we'll see what we build.
Okay.
All right, cool.
Well, just before we dive into it, I would just like to welcome back some of our friends from the community. So hello Yannick, welcome back. Yes, I can see you're trolling us again with your stories of what you can 3D print and containers that you've 3D printed. Also, welcome back. Hello Luke, and Big Pod also from our engineering team. Hello there, welcome back to you. And Phil, hello, happy new year Phil. And Graham at his desk, thanks very much for stopping by the stream for the first time.
Awesome. Well, welcome. Well, yeah, as I was kind of teeing up, this is a journey into front end land. So if you have followed along the stream for a bit, or if you're new, we've been doing this we call it like the Containers 101 series, and we've been kind of progressing towards this app that we're doing, and we have a GitHub repo that we've been making these in under SlimDevOps, Slim Containers. This one, it happens to be in the Nuxt example. I'll be building it into the Containers 101 framework. But if you remember last time, basically what we talked about was, okay, so we have this sort of monolithic Python app that we've built, and it's kind of a cool little Docker 101 tutorial. But in a real world scenario, you're going to, like, the purpose of containers and the purpose of microservices is to, kind of use the tool that fits the job the best you can. And, Python and Flask, well, I love it. And that's what I learned kind of web development on. It's great for prototyping and all that kind of stuff. It's not like what you would consider kind of like the most modern front end framework. There's other ones out there. And so we thought, like, let's kind of copy what we use on the Slim site and in the Slim SaaS product, which is Vue and Nuxt and a UI framework called Beautify. And we'll rebuild the front end in that. And that'll let us start working on kind of this microservices or multi-container approach to what we're building. So that's what we're going to focus on today. Before we jump in, Evan, can you tell us a little bit about sort of like Vue and Nuxt and Beautify, how they interact together, what you think some of the advantages of using them as a front-end framework are, stuff like that.
Sure. So to start with Vue, I think it's kind of the most understandable to think about a framework like Vue next to its competitors, you could call them. They all fill different roles. So React and Angular are kind of the first two that come to my mind. I came from a React background, and learning Vue, probably started learning it about 2 years ago at this point. It was pretty understandable to pick up coming from a purely React background. I've tinkered with Angular for a week straight just for fun before. But for somebody who has lots of exposure to React, jumping into Vue, it felt a lot simpler, as a tool that I would be onboarding new devs joining my team, or mentoring or coaching junior engineers just to try to get them up to speed so they can, feel fulfilled in their work and contribute to product development. Vue really feels very powerful. So if you can read HTML and you are kind of okay with navigating IDE, leveraging JavaScript in general, you're probably going to be able to pick up Vue a lot faster than you could pick up React. This is just an opinion, of course. I'm sure many people would debate this point with me. But I really do think that it is a powerful tool as well. So we are out here building our primary portal on Vue, and it is not really running into any sort of scalability issues or performance issues. This is something that every front-end product will have to run into eventually, but you can really achieve quality production scale with this framework. So you aren't sacrificing anything by picking Vue over React, even though React is, yes, coming from Facebook. There's a lot, maybe more productivity behind it, but you can leverage it as a tool in your tool set to achieve probably whatever you need to do for your front-end application.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then Nuxt, so Nuxt is sort of like the Vue version of Next.js, is that right? And can you tell us a little bit, like what's the purpose of Nuxt? What's it trying to do? What advantages does it bring? Maybe what does Next do? Stuff like that.
Sure. Yeah. So the way that at least I have most classically run into applications of Nuxt is using it as a server-side rendering framework. So you can also use it as a static site generator, I believe. Some other comparisons for common static site generators are, I want to say, Jekyll if you're a Ruby person, Hugo if you're working in Golang. But I think for most kind of classic web apps where you aren't just delivering a CSS, you are going to be leveraging the server-side rendering approach. And this really allows you to achieve a lot of SEO, like high quality SEO performance. And I personally, this is not something I have had to deal with myself, but I know that from trying to work with just kind of a classic single page application and really achieve quality SEO, that's the harder path. If you're trying to build something and be very SEO conscious, a server-side rendering application will kind of make that a lot easier. You're not really forcing just vanilla React, for example.
Yep.
And React, you mentioned Next.js here. That is a kind of the sister component. So you have the React Next pairing and you have the Vue Nuxt pairing. So they both achieve similar outcomes. Just it's the same kind of, what does my team use? Do we use Vue? Do we use React? Are we pushing CMS, or are we trying to kind of create a single page application feel, but then also have the qualities of a more SEO compliant structure?
Right. Because you want the page to be fast, you want it to be there, you want the crawlers to be able to understand it in a structured way. And single page web apps can, while they're cool and very feel very modern, they can kind of run into issues on that type of stuff if it's hard for computers to understand the structure of the page, right?
Yeah, and for the developer too, the maintainability, it's on one hand, you're kind of forcing a path with just the SPA versus if you pick, a framework that is built with this objective in mind, it just becomes easier, easier to maintain, easier to work on, higher dev productivity and happiness. So all wins in my mind.
Nice. Awesome. And then the last thing that we'll be using today will be Vuetify, and that's something that we use in our product. Looking at it and kind of doing the run-throughs, it felt a lot like Bootstrap. Is that the right kind of paradigm for Vuetify? What is Vuetify, and what does that get for us? And
sure.
Is it a fair comparison to Bootstrap?
It's probably a pretty fair comparison. So if you're just getting started into web dev, generic web dev, no frameworks, vanilla JavaScript, Bootstrap was probably one of the first CSS kind of, hey, how do I make this CSS thing a little bit easier and still, build quality applications? And Bootstrap is something I found a lot of success with in the past. It was probably one of the first tools that I picked up in my web development adventure into the front end, right? But if you are really building at scale, Beautify is, first off, it's built by a team of core contributors, so it is open source software. And I want to say that it is a couple. They are kind of the primary full-time devs. So we have people that are really dedicated and delivering quality software. Their documentation is great as well. Currently, it is in version 2. They are working on migrating to version 3. So that's going to be a paired release coming out with Vue 3 as well. So super excited. I currently am, waiting and hoping for that release. But it really is good to work with, right? So when you have a pretty reasonably sized code base, working with many other developers on your team, some front end, some back end, some full stack, the documentation in Vuetify and its readability within a Vue code base, these are big wins in my mind. You really have a lot of out of the box components that Vuetify provides, where if you were to try to do this with vanilla JS and write your own components, like you can, but if you can probably achieve the exact same goals of shipping out an end user experience with minor CSS changes, to implement your branding or implement particular styling that you want. If you want dark mode, Beautify is a very good application or a very good framework to implement dark mode pretty easily across your app. So really a great tool, both for what we're doing today, right? We're going to stand up an application and we can immediately leverage Beautify, as well as our whole portal for Slim.AI. I see no limits coming from Beautify, outside of we'll pick up the migration, and it's going to keep delivering value for us.
Yeah. And I think people will see that in the example we're going to go through. I mean, I honestly like just building this out. I needed a few tips from you earlier on, and then once you kind of get what it's doing, it's just amazing how much stuff is in there. And if I compare to how long it took me to write that, sort of in my kind of naive Python Flask way, trying to do my own CSS styles, trying to do my own JavaScript, it was just so much faster and easier. So hopefully people get a look at that. So
so we've had a bit of commentary from the viewers. So Big Pod from the team, our team, points out the advantages of having that server-side rendering, and then Graham also chips in to say that page loads are a lot faster if you can serve up all that stuff before it needs to be executed in the client. And I saw Yannick referring to components in Bootstrap as being life-saving utilities, and Luke, who's in the chat, was in a previous role responsible for building out one of those CSS frameworks. It was called Vanilla. So that was for
I remember Vanilla.
Very much a brand orientated framework. So we have an interested group of participants here with us today.
Okay. Well, now I'm nervous because I'm not exactly a front end developer, but I got Evan here. And then we got the chat, and we'll do this together. So I like just expectation setting. we're not teaching Vue today. This isn't a Vue introduction course. We'll be kind of like glossing over a few things. We'll try to go fast. We'll stop for questions if people want to talk about stuff, but don't think of this as kind of like a hello world Vue or Nuxt. You all in the chat are probably much more accomplished front-end developers than I am. I think our goal is to kind of like get some understanding of Vue and how it works and how easy it is, and then we'll see how easy it is to build out this photo app front end in that versus the previous one that we did in Python Flask. And then we'll have a really nice extensible front end that in future streams, we'll start connecting that up to the back end. We'll start minifying, we'll start updating our Docker Compose and all that kind of stuff. So today it'll be all front end and hopefully fun. Hopefully it's interesting, and just be patient with my mistakes.
I'm seeing nothing but positive energy coming your way from the chat, Peter.
All right, love it, guys. Love it, everybody. All right, cool. Well, let's get into it. We're going to do this from scratch, so I think it should be pretty fun. So we're starting with just a blank folder, a blank window. I do have backups here in case things go haywire, but the only requirement for this is that you have npm. We're going to use npm. Evan, one tradition we have on this stream is we debate the huge topics, and so we've decided which is the best text editor, Vim or Nano. We've decided, which is the best Star Wars or Star Trek. And now we can debate which is the best Node package manager, Yarn or NPM. In this case, we're just going to use NPM because it's the one that I know how to use. So if you have an opinion on that, or if chat has an opinion on that, feel free to say it. But cool. So we're going to go down through the, all of this text is in the README of that Nuxt file, so you can follow along. We've kind of talked about some of the things that we're doing, but the very first thing we're going to do is just do an Npm Init Nuxt app. So Npm comes with kind of a fun little Nuxt app like creator. There's a few different ways of doing it depending on your package manager, so you can check the documentation on how to do that. And we're just going to call our app front end just for fun. And this is going to take us through a little bit of a setup widget. So we have the project name that it's asking for. Oh, that's funny. So I'm just going to call it front end. We're going to do this in JavaScript, not in TypeScript. We're not quite there yet. We're going to use the NPM package manager just to be fun. Of course, you could do this in Yarn. And then probably the most important choice we're going to make here is we're going to select the Beautify UI framework, which is really nice and interesting to install. Chat can probably help us understand the nuances between these three. I'm going to choose Progressive Web App because I know it works. And I'm going to choose ESLint, though this did get me into trouble in the run through, so we might run into some. Apparently, I'm not that good at indentation, so pay attention to that. I'm also going to select the Nightwatch testing framework, which I kind of want to play with on my own and test. But again, we don't necessarily need a testing framework here. And then, Evan, this is kind of what we were just talking about, right? Sort of the server-side rendering versus kind of a single-page app. We're going to go with the server-side rendering, right?
Perfect.
And same thing, like, right, we're not doing a kind of a CMS-based Jamstack type approach where we would actually be hosting this because we're going to put it in a container and it's going to be part of our app. So we're going to choose server. This one says use this one if you're using VS Code. We're using VS Code, so we'll use that one. And we're not going to worry about the CI right now, but we, of course, will use Git. So with that, we start installing all of our packages, and this is going to give us the setup for our app. And of course, this will take a little while. And so, I think one of the things one of the hard things to understand, and Evan, tell me if you agree, like, is sort of like the first thing to kind of get out of a Nuxt or even a Reactor or something like that, a Vue, is just like kind of understanding the project structure, right?
Yeah.
Like, where do things go? Like, can you talk to me a little bit about your kind of like Vue on-ramp, and sort of as you were learning it, what were some of the things that, either tripped you up or took a little while to get?
Sure. So for me, coming from just kind of a long set of React, Redux code bases that were all at pretty far stages of development, you end up with kind of a very opinionated approach to directory structure. So we can see here now, we have these things might look a little bit familiar, these directories. We have some assets directories, some components directories, some layouts directories, and the naming is pretty good, So for running npm init, I think there's this is a really good starting point. If you're familiar with the idea of components, Bootstrap components, React components, right? You probably can take a pretty good guess as to what you might do with some of those files. And you can slice up this code base to, whatever approach you want to do over time, as long as you don't breach. There's a couple of directories that are Nuxt specific where, if you delete them, it's going to not work, right? And same thing, node modules, if you're familiar with NPM and JavaScript development in general, there are certain dependencies that you just can't really, if you remove them, your code base will cease to function. But outside of those kind of hard requirements, you really have a ton of flexibility within a Vue, a Nuxt application.
Yeah, I think there is actually a hidden folder in here that you can't see right now, but that is the .nuxt. And so that's going to contain all kind of the Nuxt internals and all that kind of stuff, right? And you really don't want to play around with that unless you know what you're doing. Whereas this other stuff that's here that it kind of gives you out of the box is that's where we're going to start our project, our code editing and all that kind of stuff.
So it's already sparked quite the conversation in chat. So Yannick points out that Npm Init is going to pull in half the internet already. And so, that this is our specialist subject. So if you're new to the stream, we tend to do a lot of container optimization stuff. So if you are not following us, please do follow, because in follow-up streams, we're going to be showing how to minify and optimize these containers to be a fraction of the size than if you just included all of those assets inside them. So that's something we're definitely going to get to. And then Luke pointed out that, you could use npx Nuxt app, so you don't need to install locally, which you could use for your local development environments. And then Black Udon, who's new to the stream, was just seeking clarification that is NuxtJS the same as Next but for Vue? And that was something we touched on just a little earlier, but essentially yes it is. But welcome to the stream.
Yep. Yeah, and if you kind of miss it, Evan went through that a little bit. And yeah, we are a Vue shop at Slim.AI. That's kind of why we're using this as an example to build this kind of sample app that we're building. Certainly you could do this in Next.js and React as well, another choice. So cool. All right, that's awesome. Yeah, and NPX, I mean, my local environment is probably, I'm on a Mac 1, I think I'll be okay. Hopefully I have enough space to pull half the internet, but certainly when we get into the container, we'll be more careful. But I probably could use a node package manager preview course or something. So anyway, but let's keep going. So one thing that's kind of cool that I really like about these frameworks, Evan, is that I can actually just run npm run dev here, right? And what did I do? Npm.
I think it's the directory that we're in, so I can see.
Oh yeah. Sorry, yeah. Oh, good. See, getting started already. If we can't do npm run dev, then we're in trouble. But so I can actually just run this. I haven't written any code yet, right? I've just really set this thing up, and this is going to give me sort of a framework that looks like Beautify, right? So I'm in my kind of front end project folder, and now it's spinning up. And if I, click over to this in my web browser, Martin, if we switch over to the web browser real quick, I think it's just cool to kind of see what comes out of the box. And we're actually going to kind of just build the app in this, and we'll sort of clean it up later. Because it gives a lot of kind of cool examples, and there's links to documentation, which we can look at, of course. And then it gives kind of a nice little quote, and here we go. So, this is based on the material design. Obviously, Evan mentioned dark mode. So, you kind of get this nice, beautiful app right out of the box. And this is what we're going to start building on. But here I can see, I've got kind of a welcome page. I've got an inspire page, and it looks like I have sort of a home page that's pulling in different components. Right. So already starting with a good framework, but we'll start building on top of this. So yeah, we bump back over to the to code. So what did we see there? So, so now we're going to get in here. So we want to build, just as a reminder of what our app does, right? Our app has a photo carousel, which serves some images out of a local folder. And then it has the ability to upload a new image. And we can categorize that image according to T, swag, and cookies, because those are the three things that we care about the most on this stream. So if you want T, swag, or cookies, of course, you can join our Discord, which is linked to on the Slim.AI site, and we talk about cookies and swag and T all the time. But that's what our app does. So the first thing we're going to have to do is kind of build this photo carousel, right? And now Vuetify is going to make this really, really super simple. We could just like jump directly into just kind of like open up like a Vue document and start building a carousel, but we kind of want to have a place to see it first, right? So the first thing we're going to do is kind of look through each of these, and Evan was kind of taking us through some of these main files. So we have components, we have layouts, and we have pages, right? And so now layouts are sort of like the wireframes of the page, right, Evan? They sort of like say like, okay, for everything that's on a page, we're going to put it in this area. And so if we crack open this default layouts, we can kind of see, okay, like, hey, this is dark mode. Hey, we've got this navigation drawer. This is starting to sound a little bit. We have this list. It looks like that list pulls in some items. So even though I might not really know Vue super well, right? Of course, we can tell it's sort of Vue-y stuff, right? Because everything has this V in front of it, V dash. And that's kind of how we're going to write our HTML. And there's like a lot of little shorthand in this one. But if we kind of just scroll down through this default.vue, we kind of get down to this script section, right? And in the script section, we're seeing some things that sort of start to look like those left-hand navigation items that we saw in our Vue app that is running on localhost, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. So I think the first thing we're going to do, right, is we kind of want to add a new one of those, right? And so we see this items, we know that's kind of getting pulled up into that list. And, you know, obviously we're kind of jumping through some stuff, so moving quickly, but we're just going to take a gander and see if we can add a carousel item, and we'll call it carousel. And we're going to write a path that's called carousel. We should have picked a easier to spell component, but that's okay. So if we do that, we can see kind of in our terminal window that, okay, now actually the client's reloading. It hasn't started throwing errors yet, which don't worry, it will. And if we actually bump back over to the web browser, we can see that, you know, one cool thing in, you know, comparatively to Python or Flask or something is like, this is just all like reloading on the fly, which is really, really nice since we're in the dev environment. And so Martin, if you look over at the, at the web browser, we can now see that we have carousel here, and you make it bigger, but it might kind of screw up my spacing. But if I click on carousel, it 404. So it's loading inside of this kind of frame that we have in this default view. Now we might not start with this, but for the sake of the tutorial, it's kind of convenient and interesting. And so we have the 404, and now we just need to go kind of figure out how to make that go away.
Yeah. And you point to this feature of, you know, you just added 5 lines of JavaScript. We waited, I don't know, a couple of seconds, and then we can go over to our browser and we see that. And that hot reloading out of the box, really, really nice. It's super convenient, honestly. If you're jumping into a code base, you don't have to, you know, you don't have to worry about compiling and any sort of errors from that side. Like, yeah, you still, you know, if we run into errors within that server client compilation, you know, you do want to catch that, and those might even be rendered to our front end. But the hot reload just makes the dev cycle time really, really fast, especially on a brand new application like this. It's very quick, very, very quick to tell you when something is really broken, or just give you your newest version of your UI.
Yeah, and don't worry, we will absolutely break some server-side rendering. I can guarantee it. So people will be able to see that. So okay, cool. So we added this to the JavaScript, so it's getting loaded into these items that we had up in this drawer. And obviously, this is all like kind of pre-written for us. We might write this from scratch, but you know, we're cooking right now. And we'll get a little more into kind of Vue structure and stuff like that in a second. Just, you know, this is kind of the easiest thing to do. So what we have, so we have layouts and we have pages. So now the layouts are kind of pulling in the pages, because I can see index and inspire here, right? And then if I click open index.vue, so this is probably that first page that had all that documentation on it, right? I start seeing these things, right? And Evan, what are these?
Sure. So these are components. So if you are unfamiliar with Vue, but you're familiar with React, kind of the special highlighting and the uniqueness, so the casing as well, right? So it is not a Vuetify component by default. It could be, but we are working with two different references here, Nuxt logo and Vuetify logo. And you could actually see in the left-hand side of the IDE underneath our components directory, we have 3 components there. Only 2 of them are referenced here. And, it's a pretty good bet that those are probably the components that we're rendering inside of the index.vue file. So it helps kind of, the pattern becomes pretty clear right away of, okay, I want to add a new component. How does that get referenced in a page, right? And just the default code base that you get really gives you a great starting plate there.
Cool. Yeah, super interesting. And we can click open the Beautify component and we can start seeing that, like, okay, this is actually a pretty simple little thing, and we'll show the full kind of structure for a component because we're going to write one here in a second. And you can start seeing, and it has template style, and then it will have, there's a script function too, which we saw before. But this is just pulling in a single image, which is the Beautify logo, and then that was displaying sort of on that index page, which is pretty cool. So great. So I'm going to say that what we need to do from a project structure perspective is we need to build a carousel component. We need to build an uploader component because that's our photo upload with the categorization in it. And then we're going to put both of those into a carousel page, which will hopefully replace that 404. Does that sound like a pretty good approach to the problem?
Yeah, sounds like a great plan.
Cool. That's the only one we're prepared for. So great. So why don't we start with the carousel page? I think that's probably going to be the easiest thing because we'll build that out and we'll extend it, but we can start with a little like hello and we'll see if we can get that before to go away. Right.
Yeah, sounds like a good test.
Cool. So I'm going to go with new file. I'm going to call it carousel.vue. And actually, this is important, right? Because these pages are going to be named according to the routes that we set up in that previous JavaScript, if I believe correctly. I don't know if that's convention or if that's on purpose or what the point of that is. But let's see, render function template not defined client. Okay, cool. So obviously VS Code, it's kind of, we've got a little autofill, autopilot going on. Like I mentioned, there's 3 main components to any Vue, or 3 main things to any Vue component, which are template, this is where our HTML goes, script, this is where our JavaScript is going to go, and code does us the favor of putting in some boilerplate there for us, and then style. Is that it, Evan, or are there others? Is it always these 3? Can you leave some out? Can you add others? Like, talk us through sort of the basic template here.
Sure. So CSS is never required, right? You don't have to ship styling. It just makes things look better. From a Vue component perspective, right? If you're going to have any form of JavaScript, that's always going to go, generally speaking, it's always going to go within your script tag, right? So if you need to console log, if you want to perform various life cycle actions, so similar to React, Vue also has this idea of a component life cycle, and there's a variety of methods that are available there. The Vue documentation is really going to be your best touch point there. And then in terms of the top section, the template, here's where you can see kind of quite a few different flavors of what to expect within this section. Generally, it's going to look like HTML. When you're working with a Vue code base that also leverages something like Vuetify, it will look a little bit different, right? And Peter pointed to this V- prefix that was in front of quite a few components where it's like, yeah, it looks like HTML, but I know when I go into my Element Explorer in the browser, it's not, I don't see a V- component. It's going to be rendered as vanilla HTML. And yeah, so this is generally, most Vue files will have these 3, sometimes bigger, sometimes smaller, but it's really at your discretion how big and what sort of conventions you take or adopt within your code base to say what should be in each one, how big should it be. Yeah.
Cool. And what about these like imports and exports? What are those doing? Are they important? Do we need them?
Sure. With this one, so exporting is yes, generally a good pattern, but if we aren't going to be there's not just one singular way to create a component. So we don't have to leverage this define component from the Vue composition API. It is not a requirement. But if you do want to access certain methods from the Vue code base that are not baked in by default. So for example, there is a created, I guess method is probably the best word. Somebody could probably correct me if I'm wrong. But you never have to import mounted when working with Vue. But oftentimes, you'll probably see a mounted method in most of your Vue components. This is where, hey, I'm about to render something to my UI. Go ahead and perform these manipulations before rendering the kind of the prettified version of the raw data input. So this is where you really have a lot of flexibility. But exactly what functions you're going to need to import, it just depends on what you need your component to do for you.
Cool.
So we have a question from chat. So Yannick asks, can a Vue app be written in TypeScript instead of vanilla JavaScript?
It's a good question.
That is a good question.
Personally don't know. I would bet based on the initial kind of Npm Init flow where we were able to pick TypeScript in that process that, yeah, you probably could. I've never even inquired to it, but generally from what I know about the TypeScript community is that they probably have put in the work to make sure that you can work with Vue and TypeScript. I don't know how much complexity you add on top of that, but I'd love to hear from anybody with some TypeScript proficiency about what that's like.
Yeah. Future stream, maybe TypeScript. If we ever do TypeScript on this stream, I think I'll retire, maybe, or something. I don't know. That'll be just like the crowning moment. Cool. All right. So that all sounds great. I think I'm going to do the lazy way out of I'm going to open up this pretty simple inspire.vue page, and I'm just going to copy what it has in the script because I see some errors starting to flow up in my web browser, and it didn't like some of the things in the script. So I'm going to call this carousel page here. I don't think this name thing actually really does anything at the moment. And when I do that, if we bump over to the web browser, now I have hello stream there and I am in good shape. So now my carousel page is working. So that's great. We'll stay on the web browser for a second. I'm going to go into, Evan, you kind of mentioned the Beautify docs before, and I just want to +1 how good this documentation is and how much is actually in here. And that's not just because we're a sponsor because we love them. And if you click over here, one of the super cool things that you showed me the other day, which is, you get a lot of kind of getting started and installation guides. So people who are interested in Beautify and working with it, you can get a lot of information. This will look a lot like the kind of the Bootstrap documentation when you start getting into it about grid systems and responsive design breakpoints and kind of all that great stuff. But if you go down to, so we want a carousel, right? And you see these UI components down here, right? And I can't tell you how unbelievably painful it was for me to write this carousel in the Python Flask app that I did. Although maybe there's an easier way to do that. But if you come to any of these UI components that are here, one, they give you a lot of kind of like out of the box tutorial things here that you can drag and drop. But this right here, Evan, now this is just going to give me the actual kind of like HTML template script and the script that I need for these Vue components. Is that right?
Exactly, yeah. So right below the template and the script, how we have this little slide with the button, this is the code. This is the template. So your raw Beautify /HTML and then the paired JavaScript. So it gives you a great boilerplate to start off of. So generally, when I'm doing development, especially with a new component, right? So I want a carousel. I've never done a carousel in Vue before. This would probably be what I would start with, right? And it helps you establish, hey, what primitives must I have in order to work with this component? And you can see as well, it doesn't look like too much complexity versus if I, go into my Google console and I say, I want a carousel, right? That works in Vue. You're probably going to get a lot more bloat. So Vuetify really gives you something simple and functional with a working example too. So it's really a great reference.
Yeah, couldn't plus one that more. And I happen to know that this little guy with the squirrel is the best one for our example. And it's not only that, it's cute. So we'll do that. Although the eagle there, that's a little dark. But yeah, and so here we see some of these other things that we've been talking about before. So inside the template, we have this v-carousel. So that's the name of the component that we're using. And then that has some other primitives, I guess we'd call them, that have some baked in items like, the Vue carousel item. So that's going to be like one of the individual photos. And here it has, some, transitions and fades and stuff like that we need. So in the words of Kelsey Hightower, great developers copy good developers copy and great developers paste. I'm going to just kind of grab this code and pop it into my template section. And then I'm going to grab the script, and I see all these kind of things happening here. And I'm going to grab that script and I'm going to pop that into where I had the script before. And we'll see how that goes. And starting to get a few errors here, so we can duck into what some of those are. Multi-template root, I happen to know what that one is. So I'm going to explain that one in a second because we'll actually run into it again. So I'm just going to delete that little header that I had the first time. And now I don't seem to be getting any errors. I seem to be rebuilding successfully. And now maybe if we bump over to our front end app, actually, if we look back over in the, well, we can go here. So yeah, all right, cool. Now we've got this same little component that we have. All right, super cool, right? Great, we just built a photo carousel, and that took us 2 streams to do last time. So
wow, yeah.
No, it didn't actually take 2 streams. It took me 2 streams worth of preparation to do it, but only 1 stream. But that was super quick, right? Now, if we look back over at the code, we can kind of just take a quick look at what it's doing. Actually, you know what? I'm kind of surprised that worked at all, to be totally honest. Oh, I know why it worked. I did it wrong. So I just copied and pasted this into the carousel.vue. Now note the lowercase here. Now normally we're not going to get into title cases, but remember this is a page, and I actually probably want this to be a component, right, Evan? Because I might use this carousel in other places, and it's not just this page that I'm going to use the carousel on.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Yeah. So if this is just the first of many potential carousels inside of this application, you'll probably want to end up with a component. Starting it on the carousel.vue page is okay, but migrating it, building for maintenance, right? That's really where creating that component is the way to play.
Cool. All right, well, why don't we do that really quickly? And I'm going to go over here into my components folder, and I am going to create a new file. And now the convention here, right, is to put it in capitals, right? So I'm going to do carousel.vue in capital. Is that good? I think I got yelled at last time are these supposed to be 2 words? Do they need to be 2 words?
There are a variety of opinions on the best way to name components.
Okay. Another debate for us.
Yeah, I can point to, I think the repository that we shared with everybody in chat references Vue School. And Vue School has a really good discussion around component naming and hierarchy. So I will defer to the creator there because it's really good quality, honestly. If you're working with Vue, even if you consider yourself very well versed, it's a great learning opportunity.
Yeah. +1 big shout out to Vue School. I've taken a couple courses there. It's well worth it. It's also not super expensive, and they run some pretty cool events. They actually have an event next week that is for Nux Nation and Vue Nation. So definitely +1 to Vue School. So good shout out. Okay, cool. So we're going to just go with carousel for now in ours just because it's easy. We'll again do our template. And again, I'm going to pull all of this code over into that template. And I'll delete it from here. And then I'm going to grab all of this script as well. And I'll probably want to put another script back in here in a second, but I'm going to put that in a script tag. We're not doing, thank you for the autofill, but we don't need it. I'm just copying and pasting just kind of the baseline stuff there. And so now our carousel should be working, except that now we have to add it, right? If we remember over here on index.vue, we had this Nuxt logo, so we need to do the thing on carousel, and I put the slash there. And if I save, I should have my server rebuild again super quickly. And if I look at my web browser, okay, it's literally all the same exact thing. Okay, cool. So nothing really changed. We just turned that into a component. And now if we were going to use that component elsewhere in our stack, it'd be nice and easy to maintain. We don't have carousels all over the different place. Right.
Exactly.
So, super cool. All right. Awesome. We are cooking. So now obviously these aren't our images. So we want to put our images where we need them. That's going to be in this static folder over here. So that'll look familiar. Probably to most people. It's a pretty common pattern. I happen to have kind of a pre-canned images folder over here that has some of our Cody sock photos and stuff like that, if you remember that. And then I can go back over here and I'll just kind of hard code some of the links to these. Socks.png and oops, that's not going to work because I misspelled images. And one thing to know,
there we go. This is pair programming via.
I know. It's always you doing this. This is how we work at SlimDevOps all the time. Just if you want to come work with us, we're hiring. We just always get together on Slack channels and Discord, and we just code together. It's a fun day. He lets me code for the product, but Evan does, and he's very effective at it. Cool. All right, awesome. So we now have our images, t-shirts, Cody stickers, and socks. And just like a note, I mean, this is an images folder in our static folder, so static's not going to get served, right? So this should work fine. So we save that, and if we bounce back over to the web browser, we can now see we no longer have cute squirrels and crazy looking, well, we do have a crazy looking moon. We don't have crazy looking birds of prey anymore, but that's just because I forgot to delete one of the images out of the list that we had in those items. So cool. So we built a Vue component. We added some custom, kind of information to it. There's a ton of stuff in the Beautify docs that we could use to kind of make this look really cool and, make the transitions what we want, make the bottom part what we want and all of that. And that works really, really well for us. So, in 20 minutes, we have a photo carousel and, and it's beautiful and it's responsive and, it has everything that we want. So that's really great. I'll pause for a second. If people have questions, people want to dive into something else, people have questions for Evan, please ask them, please let us know. I'm wondering, Martin, we could go through and do the forum and look at what that looks like, though it's kind of a lot of the same, or we could start getting into the Docker file for this one if we want to go a little shorter on time. Do you have a preference?
No, I've been fielding some of the questions as they've been cropping up. One of the things we learned is Big Pod pointed out that yes, TypeScript is supported by Vue and all the necessary tooling exists, which I think Dark Udon, who's joining us for the first time today, was pleased to hear, because they said they need TypeScript pumped directly into their veins and their code editor at all times.
There we go.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Yeah, TypeScript's one of those that might be like my, 2024 New Year's resolution or something. I am not good with JavaScript, as you can probably see from the stream, but super cool. All right, awesome. Well, sounds good. Why don't we kind of do the short way? Because I think when I have some kind of pre-canned code that's in the tutorial. So if you're following along with the tutorial, we'll start doing a little more copy paste. So let's create another component real quick. And we'll call that component uploader.vue. And we'll get into that. And I'm just going to copy pasta this one. If I can find it just for the sake of time. And that means that I'm going to start getting some errors about indentation and whatnot, but that's okay. So here I've built out, again, you can kind of see, there's some great just like containers and file inputs and checkbox kind of behavior. I mean, forms sometimes are like the bane of my existence when it comes to front-end development. And Vuetify just does all of this for you. You really don't have to worry about it. It looks really great. It has built-in icons that you can use. And there's just a little like kind of minor JavaScript that I updated from their example in order to make it into sort of a component. And I'm actually just going to copy and paste this in. And I think we'll get our first error here is probably the most likely thing that's going to happen. So I of course need to now add this to my carousel.vue, right? I made uploader.vue. It has all this cool stuff in it. This is like, should be the form. And over here, I'm going to go add uploader as the component. And now I'm getting kind of an angry notice that template root requires exactly one element. And if I'm over in the web browser, I see an error, same error, it stops loading, right? So Evan, what this means, right, is that for these templates, you need to have a single root element, is right? And it can be anything.
Exactly.
Right? So
yeah. Any non-template element, right? Like I'm not quite sure what happens if you put immediately, nest one template within another template, but some form of top level parent. And this error message. This error message is super common. I will run into this very, very frequently, just because you can use templates with nested within components, right? So it's a great way if you're accessibility minded. It's a really good way to avoid div spam or other element spam, where you can hang conditionals within templates without actually, dumping more junk into the DOM. So the view structure, while it is every once in a while obnoxious of, oh, okay, fine, I'll go put this arbitrary template or this arbitrary, div container, but it really kind of, it's a good design. It forces the developer to be mindful of what they're doing.
Okay, cool. Good to know. So I just wrapped my components in rows just to be cheap and easy, and it looks like I should probably have them in columns too. This is my old Bootstrap heritage coming out. You mentioned div spam. I was going to say maybe there's row and column spam too, but this will actually make for, like Bootstrap, Beautify will have things like breakpoints and stuff like that you can kind of munge with, and but it just gives you a nice kind of like grid design. And if we bump back over to the web browser, we can see that, that was a little bit of copy and paste code, and it might not have been super obvious to people on stream because you're kind of moving through it fast. But if you look at the code, in the tutorial, or if you look at it when we post it up to the site, it's super, super simple. It's just v-checkbox and v-file input. And now we have this kind of like file uploader, so I can upload more images. Obviously won't work right now. And then I can, kind of have my swag and my cookies and that kind of stuff. And obviously I have a little bit of JavaScript that I need to work on to make that work, because those shouldn't all come up at the same time. But, we built that out pretty quickly, and now we have sort of a working and pretty front end. We can begin to, kind of make it even better. And this is going to become, something that can just live as our front end. And if we have other developers, they're going to be able to come in and use it. So pretty, I'm going to go through and containerize this thing. Now that it's kind of running, it's sort of working, and obviously there's, some improvements, and we'll make those next time. And if anybody wants to come mess around with some front-end development, work with us in our Discord channel tomorrow, we can do that. I think we're also going to try to minify this one tomorrow, which will be fun. But let's make let's make a Docker file for this. So in the front-end folder, I'm just going to create a Docker file, and I'm going to do a little copy pasta on this one too, but just because I don't really feel like writing all of it out. If you look at the, one thing in the documentation of Nuxt is that it does need to run with an LTS version of Node, is something that it says. And that can run into a little bit of an issue with If you're using like Node latest, or let's say you have a specific version of Node that you're pinning and it might not be the right one. So I ran into this when I first started doing it. I was just using, I think it was Node latest, and it would build the image and compile it and all that kind of stuff, but then it would just kind of throw up at the end. So that is one thing to know. I mean, if you go into the Slim Developer Platform, and there's a link to the Node repository in the Slim Developer Platform, you can see through differences in all the LTS versions. There's an LTS Slim, there's an LTS Buster, and kind of compare and contrast them to some of the pinned versions that we've seen before. But we know that Node LTS will work on this, and I think BigPod's going to help us tomorrow kind of walk through the minification example of this, because that has some implications for when we go to do minification with Docker Slim, which is our open source project that can reduce your container size. We'll want to look at some of that. But for right now, it's a pretty straightforward container. One thing we do have to create this, we create this Nuxt app folder and make that our working directory. That allows us to kind of install everything that we want. I'm not being super careful about like not installing Node modules and stuff like that, because I'm going to slim it later. But in our best practices, that might be something we want to do. I'm also not adding a user and all those best practices that we've talked about, because this is just kind of a little example. So let's just make sure that we kind of know what we're doing. But we're going to run the install, we're going to build it, and then we're going to expose our port 3000. And the only environment variables that Nuxt really cares about are these host and port variables. And then you're just going to run npm start, which is going to kick off the app and serve it.
And I guess, Peter, I kind of would like to challenge you with some trivia here. So and feel free to bounce the question back at me, or a variant of it, right? But so I noticed when we were initially standing up our application, we did not run npm run build. We ran npm run dev, but in this Docker file, I see that we're running, we run npm install. Okay, I'm familiar with that. But then the two next npm commands are npm run build and npm start. What's the difference? Like, why not just npm run dev?
I have a little bead of sweat going down here. My best answer is that's the way they did it in the tutorial that I was using to build this one. I actually don't know. I'm actually not quite an expert. I wonder if I have Luke or somebody who's like worked quite a bit more with NPM and stuff like that, know why that is the case. I believe I could make something up, but I actually don't know the answer to that. So I'm not going to just sort of pretend. I know this works. I don't know if it would work if I took those things out and just did npm run dev as well. But my sort of initial thought is that it probably has to do with sort of like using npm CI versus using npm install, which is probably something we should be doing here in order to kind of lock in and pin our dependencies and all that kind of stuff. There's probably a hardening exercise we should do with this container. But if you know the answer to this, Evan, then please enlighten us. But
I think that the answer to this question actually is pretty variable, right? So this npm start, I would wager that our package.json has both a build command, a start command, and a dev command. Exactly what each of those does is pretty much dependent upon how that file was coined. So yeah, like we could take a look at that package.json. I would definitely be curious to see.
All right, we got a bunch of dependencies in here.
Yeah, so within the script section, we see that there's a couple of different Nuxt commands here. So just dev is what we ran first, and then for our containerized environment, we are taking the build versus the start approach. And I'm not personally too familiar with the internals of Nuxt, right? What's the difference? I know that there's a lot of consequences to the difference, right? So you mentioned npm CI versus npm install. So what you get from a dependency tree perspective is a little bit different for both of those paths. And just like that, with Nuxt versus Nuxt build and Nuxt start, there's probably going to be a pretty significant difference in how the code is run and how it is delivered. Your overall size of what is being served is probably different too. So these are like little particulars where maybe they're inconsequential at first because, hey, the tutorial that you're working off of, it's how it did it, it works. You can kind of just roll with it, right? No problems. But eventually you could always run into weird corner cases where there's a difference between your local dev environment and the built environment. And so it's just something to be mindful of. You know, you don't have to necessarily go into the particulars and understand every bit of why, right? But just noting, okay, if I ever run into funky CSS issues that I see in my dev environment, or I don't see in my dev environment, but I do see in my prod environment or in my built environment, these are just little things to take note of.
Yeah. So on that point, BigPod points out that npm run dev sets up a development server, whereas npm start starts a production grade server, and there are some differences in like the dependencies that are pulled in. And Phil goes on to say, you know, it leaves out some of the bloat and attack surface when you choose to use the npm start. And I see that Aisha, our colleague, has joined us in the Twitch chat. And that is a nice segue to the container report that she put together at the back end of last year, where one of the biggest findings we observed was the amount of dev tooling that ends up in production containers that actually creates a broader attack surface, and also sort of tooling for, you know, would-be attackers to then utilize those containers if they become compromised to hop into other parts of your infrastructure and platform. So and it's better to sort of mimic production in your dev environment where you can. And this is something that we've discussed, for those people that are new here, this is something we've discussed several times, and how we use our open source tool Docker Slim to remove that attack surface. So earlier on in the chat, you know, there was a conversation about the amount of dependencies that we were pulling in for this app. And I was in the chat saying, don't worry about that, because we're experts at this, and in a subsequent stream we'll be showing how to minify all of that and remove all of the assets and files that you simply don't need for your production container. So you can take your dev environment and turn it into a production ready, adhering to best practices container without having to learn a whole new broad suite of tooling. So there's lots of crossovers with sort of past conversations in this topic.
And I can be kind of like a perfect storm of laziness on this stuff, especially when it comes to Node, I think, because Node is kind of, you know, particularly noisy when it comes to dependencies, or has a lot of dependencies, as Yannick kind of alluded to. And I don't know Node super well, so I also know that I have Docker Slim in my back pocket, you know, which we obviously support that open source project here at Slim.AI, and so I've gotten to know it pretty well, and I know that I'm going to slim this container after the fact. So, and I'm not rebuilding it all the time. If I was doing daily dev work on this image, I would really care about the build time and how long it takes to spin up. In this case, you know, I've used this container 4 or 5 times, and, you know, if it's 7 minutes versus 3 minutes, okay, whatever. And I'm going to slim it after the fact to kind of harden it, take out all the dependencies I don't need. I'm going to use that Docker Slim to do that. So yeah, kind of not best practices on my side, I think, but also like probably not a story that is that uncommon for developers working with some of these tools when you don't necessarily understand what the nuances of each of these things, for sure. Cool. All right, great conversation. So, well, why don't we go ahead and we'll just I'm going to stop this development. Sorry, it looks like it already stopped. So I'm going to come back here to my command line. I have my Docker file written, and I want to make sure I saved it because I don't know I save things. And I'm going to build it. So we'll call this one the Docker build front end photo app. And now the magic's happening. Remember what I just said about not caring about build times, but so yeah, maybe we should care about build times because our streams will be shorter, but this will take a little bit. But it's just building the image, and so we're running this like we would any other Node container, and then I'll run it, and I think we'll probably get to a good stopping point there. And so just to kind of like clue people into where we want to go with this stream, so we're gonna, you know, the work that's kind of in front of us is going to be to, you know, we still have some JavaScript work to do because we didn't really do anything that kind of passes the data that we need back to the backend API. So we'll have to kind of rig that up. We'll have to make some changes to the API to be able to handle that, make it, take the entire front end out of the monolithic app that we built before and set up the API. And then we'll have some changes to the Docker Compose file that Martin started last time, which will be where we'll actually get this magic of splitting up the front end, the API, and then we'll add a database to that like in a later stream. So I think like next stream, that's kind of like a good target for us to be able to do some of that stuff. So
Yeah, and sort of the ultimate end goal of all of this is once we have our sort of multi-service stroke multi-container app broken up to front end, back end, and database, we'll have a Docker Compose which defines that logical whole. We'll also be demonstrating how you can minify, optimize that collection of containers as they operate as a logical whole. And then the cherry on top is we're going to then be deploying that to Lambda or serverless. That's sort of where we want to get to. Something that we do with our production systems, and we've learned some of the hard lessons along the way of getting to that point, and we'll be sharing that with all of you.
Yeah. All right, awesome. So we built our image. It's 1 gig, so probably have a lot of dependencies in there. Now, I didn't use the LTS Slim image. I didn't like use an Alpine image, so that's fair. That's kind of expected. But now we can run this Docker run command. We're just going to call the container the front end, and we'll run it on port 3000. And then if we bump over to the web browser and we do 000 3000, should be running on the same port. And we have our carousel. And it pulled in our swag images, and boom, much prettier, memory leaks, extensible material design, front-end framework that's modern, that'll make developers happy, that they get to work on it. And now it's a completely separate consideration from the back-end app or the monolithic app. So if we want to make updates to this, we don't have to make them to the entire app. We can only update the front end. So pretty good success for us. We have that running in a container. We'll be able to put that in Docker Compose in our next stream. We'll be able to minify it on Discord tomorrow. And, I think we're off and running. So cool. Evan, any other thoughts from your side? Because I think that is as much as I was hoping to cover today. So
yeah, all I would say is as a developer and as somebody who has had to pull a lot of Docker containers and off of some questionably strong Wi-Fi connections, having to pull a 1 gig container, right? That is the fully bloated version of it, right? So there's a lot of room, and this is empty application, right? You just coined this application today. There have not been devs working on this for 100,000 hours, and it's already at 1 gig. So that pattern, that thought, it just shows a lot of room for improvement. So I'm really excited to see what sort of returns we can get there and how small we can go.
Perfect. That's awesome. Super cool. Well, Evan, thank you so much for the help. You are welcome here on stream anytime, especially when we are doing Vue and Nuxt. And I know you know Go as well, so we might take you up on that at some point. So, but no, this was awesome. It's super cool having you here and was super helpful for me. So
yeah, lots of fun. Thanks both of y'all for having me, and thank you to the chat for indulging me in my first time on stage. So happy to be here.
Yeah, that was good.
You did great. And give Evan a follow on Twitter if you're not doing so already. Evan, what's your Twitter handle?
So I just made a Twitter account today, so I'm only a little bit late to the Twitter game, but the handle is dev_with_Evan. So I will be probably rejoining if everybody is happy to have me again. I would love to jump back on here in the future. So
yeah, absolutely. So I'd like to say thanks to Graham at Desk for joining us for the first time. He says good stream. Thank you. Thanks to Peter and Evan for making it so. And Graham says he's expecting a 20 meg image out of the minification process. I think that's so. I think we can do that.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to be too far away. I think it'll be. Yeah. Well, thank you for joining me, Graham. It's awesome to have new people, and stay with us. I'm excited to do some more like front-endy kind of stuff here. It's been pretty fun learning Vue and getting to know it, and so I think this container will slim down nice and easy, hopefully. So.
Yeah, and for those of you that are watching and you're involved in front-end dev and deploying things to containers, or maybe you're doing front-end dev and you're not doing the container stuff yet, and you want to learn more about that, then consider giving us a follow, because we do lots of the crossover from developer experience and best practice and containers and stuff like today, where Peter and I get to try something new and learn something new with our colleagues. So, give us a follow. We're going to be expanding this series, and you can join us at community.slim.ai. That's where our discourse lives, and we also have a Discord server as well, and that's where we sort of orchestrate what we do, what we work on. And tomorrow we'll be in our Discord server at around 3 p.m. UK time. So what time is that for you normally, Peter? You're in the East Coast.
Yeah, 10 a.m. East Coast time, and Evan's an East Coaster too, so 10 a.m. our time, and I don't know, I can't make up like a completely random one, so we'll just say 10 a.m. our time, 7 a.m. Pacific time. So
right, okay, and we'll start to go through the minification process of the container that you've just created. So come and join and participate in that. Your input, or if you just want to learn, is welcome. So I think we'll put a bow on this, shall we?
Wonderful. Well, thanks everybody for joining. Really appreciate the chat, and thanks for indulging me in doing some public Vue.js. If you told me I was doing that 3 weeks ago, I would have said no way. So pretty fun.
Maybe a testament to the choice of technologies there, I think, as much as anything. Right. Certainly, well done. Certainly. Congratulations, Peter. You can go and sit in a safe place now and recover from demo fatigue. Thank you all very much, everyone. We'll see you all again soon. Bye bye for now.
All right. Bye, everybody.